Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, welcome. Welcome to our third panel today. The name of our panel is Responsible Gaming and Social Responsibility, the Art of Good Business. My name is Miloš Savić. I'm partner at the consulting company WM Equity Partners from Belgrade, and I will be moderating this panel. Before I make a short introduction of our panelists and the key subjects we would like to discuss today, let me just first get your attention on two technical notes. So first, I can see that we have a lot of people on board with us today. So please feel free to ask questions, give us your thoughts, feedbacks, etc. All questions will be collected during our panel discussion, and we will try our best to answer as much as possible. You will be able to post your question using the Who application as you did previously. We have devoted the last 10 minutes of our panel for the Q&As. But if we see there are a lot of interesting questions emerging during our conversation, I will include them as we go and hopefully make this as interactive as possible. Also, for choosing the language of your preference, you should just click on the interpretation button, which is just below on the screen, and choose the language you prefer. Second, I would also like to call all participants to join us on the WM Equity Partners 15 minutes live stream, which will take place right after this panel, where my colleagues will present some of the WM Equity Partners innovative services in this field and how they can help potentially support your business. Access to this live stream will also be possible through the Who application. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing this application now name correctly. Okay, so let's get back to the main subject of our panel. As you all know, and as panelists before mentioned on several different occasions, almost a year ago, we have been globally confronted with some unprecedented events caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we can say that this pandemic has and unfortunately still is influencing our lives, our daily routines, our habits, but also the way we do our business. And the gambling industry obviously is not an exception. Especially the online part of the business, which is evidently growing, and this is probably not only due to the pandemic, but probably also due to digitalization trends we see globally for a number of years now. In a way, this is a good news for the gambling companies, obviously, but on the other hand, it puts a lot of pressure, I think, on them to find the right balance between their profits and social costs of gambling. And this is exactly the key point of our panel. Because as I heard many managers in gambling industry say, we are here as part of the entertainment industry and not to create addiction toward bad habits. So you also need to have in mind that all these issues could not be seen out of both legislation and self-regulation context. As we all know, in most countries, gambling industry is heavily regulated. Unfortunately, laws are not always able to cover each and every possible situation. And this is why we always have these thin lines between defining what activities are done according to the law, but also acceptable by some ethical and moral grounds and principles. I think that unfortunately, even the ethical and moral grounds sometimes could differ depending probably on the market, local society, etc. And personally, I do believe that finding that balance is what makes this business development in this industry extremely demanding, especially at the time of crisis, and even more in developing countries and regions like Serbia and Balkans. So a lot to talk about. And without further ado, let me introduce you to all our dear panelists. Hopefully they are all online now. Okay, they will join us probably. Most of them come from different regions and segments of the gambling industry. So we have covered, I think, business development, marketing, regulation, self-regulation part. And I am really looking forward for receiving their different looks and expertise on some of my questions. I believe that the gentlemen won't mind, so I will start with the ladies first. With us today are Nadiya Attard, Director of Sales at Relax Gaming, Vasiliki Panousi, Manager of EU Affairs, European Gaming and Betting Association. Then we have Tom Edmonds, Associate, Northridgelaw. We still don't have Zoran, Mr. Zoran Puhač, who is Secretary General of European Organization for Gaming Law. Hopefully he will join us soon. And last but definitely not the least, Mr. Borjan Popović, Corporate Communication Director from Mozzart. Panelists, welcome. Welcome to our panel. As you heard, I have made a small introduction teaser to our audience, hopefully inspiring some interesting discussions. So, but let us start from the beginning, maybe even adding some additional building blocks on previous panels we have heard, which, by the way, I think were excellent, and even touch on many issues we will be dealing with here also. So my first question relates to current trends. I have mentioned COVID-19, but I'm sure there were a lot of things happening in the industry even without the COVID-19 pandemic. So which are, by your opinion, from your perspective of your company, institution, etc., which are the top trends you see in the gambling industry today, and how they influence the industry development, both from the perspective of public perception of the industry, which is definitely one of the key issues here, but also the industry capacity to successfully balance between customer demand and social cost. So whoever wants to speak first, or I need to point the finger. Vasiliki, I can see that your microphone is on, so maybe we can start from you.
Sure. So I think I would start by, let's say, differentiating between positive trends and negative trends. But in my opinion, these two go hand in hand because one is very often the consequence of another. First of all, I would like to highlight that in the recent years, we have seen a massive shift from monopolies to multi-licensing schemes in the member states of the EU. This is, of course, an advantage, not only for the gambling operator, but also for the regulator, who is more able to control the gambling operation in a better way. Of course, it's very important because hopefully it means less black market and more power to the consumer. However, and now I will go to the negative trendy part, the black market, I would say, is still here, is still being empowered by limitations to the gambling offer. Sometimes it's product limitations, sometimes it's financial limitations. But I would say more importantly, and in my opinion, this is the biggest trend at the moment, is because of marketing restrictions. So we often see in majority of member states, regulators restricting the marketing practice of gambling operators In some countries, they cannot even advertise at all. And in my opinion, this is a problem. This causes very negative consequences to channeling and ultimately to the consumer. So I would say that the industry has to react, has to take action, because often these marketing restrictions go hand in hand with lack of responsibility or lack of joint actions.
Vasiliki, can I ask you one more thing, considering that you have opened up the question about the marketing? On the first panel, we had an opportunity to hear the phrase aggressive marketing. Can you just a bit touch also on that in more details, but we can also discuss it with other panelists later during the conversation.
Sure, I'm very happy to take it, and I'm very happy to reply to any marketing question, because my work is focusing lately a lot on that. Aggressive marketing, usually it has to do with ignoring ignoring how a responsible message should be. So usually containing very inviting language that creates the sensation that this is a unique opportunity that has to be done right now, otherwise I'm going to lose it. Or as we saw, unfortunately, lately, messaging that relates to COVID-19 and COVID-free betting rooms. So basically is taking advantage of lockdowns and confinements to invite people to gamble in COVID-free rooms. This is, of course, something that should not happen, and that my association, EGBA, disapproved it with many public statements. And of course, this is a practice that should be avoided by any company if they want to be responsible.
Thank you, Vasiliki. Then I will just return to my question to other panelists if someone would like to continue. Nadiya, maybe you would like.
No, so even like what we can see right now, a lot of people are talking about even stricter measure because of the COVID. But for example, from the supplier side, I can see that yes, maybe first month we saw a spike in the bets and the gaming, but then like pretty much like almost like, less than a month later, things got back to normal. But at the same time, like a lot of regulators, a lot of countries started to introduce a lot of restrictions on responsible gaming, or as UK it's now like going to call safe gaming. And do we really know that measures what they're taking are actually good measures? Are they going to work? Because like, for example, UK is extremely aggressive. Sweden is extremely aggressive. Latvia, for example, completely banned online gaming, during COVID. And what is good, what is bad, because society is already locked down. So in many countries, people cannot go out, people have to stay home, and they're already not happy. And then like you have even more restrictions, and what is the right step here? And certain things, for example, instead of like protecting players in the right way, just restricting everything. Some ideas, as for example, which are coming lately from the regulators, even to responsibly control the design of the game. But do the regulators actually know what is responsible game design, like what is allowed, what is not? Then, like it was mentioned, marketing as well. I do agree that there should be a balance with these things, but banning all the marketing, it's might be only like, worse. And so there are some regulators which are taking the right steps, but there are some regulators which, in my opinion, are taking it to a very extreme level. And what eventually happens, and again, we see it a lot, there is a lot of black traffic, which is not helping anyone. Instead of regulating things in correct way, people are actually, like the government's actually pushing players on the black side to the casinos which are illegal, to the operators which don't have a license, which means they're completely unprotected. And people who would like to gamble, they will find the way how to gamble. And we will end up in the situation worse as it is. It can be also coming from the background that there is no understanding, especially in some, like yesterday we had a panel discussion as well on another meeting, and there was a conversation about Ukraine, which was regulated lately. And the feedback was that they were so focused about taxes, about putting things right and licenses, that when one of the panelists brought up the question about responsible gaming, it was something completely new to them. They didn't even think about it. So again, you know, there should be balance. And when the country is regulated, especially if it's a new country which is getting regulated, you know, it's important that the regulator will actually get assistance from the industry, from the operators, from the game suppliers. And some regulators do it really well, like for example, Danish authority and so on. They do consultations, they listen, they take a feedback. And some unfortunately don't. They introduced restrictions, like latest regulation in Germany. You know, we will see how it's going to happen, but to be honest, like after allowing players to gamble for such a long time with no restrictions and everything, and then limiting to, you know, 500 or 1,000 euro a month, it's let's see what's happened, but it's going to be interesting way how to see. So again, my feedback here is there should be a balance, and let's not push players to extreme, because just regulating, you know, it's not going to solve the problem. You need to make sure that people actually comply, and the measures are strict, but they're also balanced out in the right way, so not to push people in the black market. And a lot of regulators, unfortunately, don't realize that people go and gamble. They think they block one website and the problem is solved, but unfortunately, it's not, as we all know. So that's from my side.
Thank you, Nadiya. Gentlemen, please.
Miloše,
Would like to.
Miloše,
Yes,
Miloše.
yes, we can hear you, Borjan. Yes.
Čujemo se? Ako dozvolite, pa mislim da smo ovdje malo
If you
počeli...
allow me, I think that we started talking from the beginning when Vasiliki initiated the aggressive marketing and black market. I don't think that's the right way to put these things into this relation. I think that the biggest problem is to prevent the black markets, and we should not give the opportunity for we should stop the monopoly laws. I think that everybody should have the same chance. Whether the marketing is going to be aggressive or less aggressive, it depends on the personal assessment. It depends on the affinity or how you look at these things. But if we have set up the rules of the games in the right manner, I think this is the best way to stop the black market, if you're talking about that. But if we talk about the aggressive marketing and how we address the players and how we protect our business in a way, these are the things for some other analysis, not for referring this to the players and whether that is going to push them to the black markets or the gray zone. When we mention COVID-19, of course, we have to bear in mind that the industry, the gaming industry, I don't like to, I call it gaming industry. It was most affected globally. So the company from which I come, Mozzart company, which is a regional leader in this game of chance, we had a loss of almost 95% of our turnover. So that's a serious financial problem. So we try to organize our business in these circumstances. But on the other hand, I'll tell you later about CSR. But when we talk about that, my colleague Puhač will explain that we should differentiate the CSR by law and social responsibility. These are different things. So in both things, I think that they are integrated in our company from the very beginning. So in all these measures of adapting to the businesses, first of all, we try to comply with the recommendations and the measures of the government and the local self-governments, and then to try and get some benefit from that to make this business sustainable as much as possible. As you all know, we were not able to do because our stores were closed, so the places where the payments were supposed to be made, but there were no matches taking place, so people could not bet on anything. They could not. There were no sports events. So those were the problems, and I think that we tried as much as possible to sustain our businesses without jeopardizing people and presenting that as some sort of our CSR. But I think that we will talk about this later on. We will talk about social responsibility during COVID. That's all.
Thank you, Borjan. Vasiliki, you were mentioned, so if you would like to add something, please do. If not,
maybe I can add, if I understand correctly, and just to make myself clear, I'm not talking about a link between aggressive marketing and that would. So if I'm a customer and I see aggressive marketing, it doesn't mean that I would seek a black marketed operator to gamble. But if I'm a regulator and I see, 10,000 ads on television or very aggressive messaging on gambling ads, maybe I would think, this is not very consumer friendly, so I will ban it, for example. And that's how the black market rise. If there is no information to the consumer about where he can play safely, in the era of Google, anyone can make a fast research and find something which is not regulated to play. And that's where his rights will not be protected.
Thank you, Vasiliki. Zoran, glad we have you online now, so maybe you can also answer the first question. If you need it, I can repeat it for you if you're not. Just unmute yourself, please.
Thank
I think
you.
now we can hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Being old and gray, I have to start with 2000 years BC. I'm kidding a little bit. We have to be completely aware that gambling relations with governments are pretty old. And only in the last 50 years, let's say, regulators recognize gambling as a kind of industry. Before that, we had two situations. It is strongly forbidden or nobody cares. Because of that, through so many years, thousands of years through the history, we had a situation that having so many money in such a kind of activity and being not regulated, it was a kind of source or stimulations for criminal activities. And this is the source of stereotypes which are really strong nowadays. And now we have a kind of marketing activities as a necessary activity for to support every industry. We have 2 or 3 sides in such a judgment if something is so aggressive. We have one pretty modern in Italy and maybe in Spain to forbid almost all activities dealing with marketing in games of chance. We have the second example in Great Britain and so many other countries that they have very precisely defined all marketing activities. And we have nowadays, it's an example from about 1 year ago in Sweden. They had a pretty strange judgment, for my opinion. They said all companies on our market must know what is aggressive marketing. And all of marketing players should, let's say, swim around and try to hit opinion of regulators and opinion of courts. It is insane, according to my opinion. And finally, I will say something I recommended during my marketing days to my coworkers. If you have any dilemma about some marketing actions, give up. Do not push it strongly. If you have any dilemma, you have to know two things. One is public opinion is much stronger than regulations and can make much more damage than some regulators in one judgment, let's say, one punished case. Because of that, you have to take care not only about regulations, but about public opinion. And because of that, if you have any dilemma, give up. Probably you will avoid any aggressive marketing approaching it that way.
Thank you, Zoran. Thank you, Zoran, for
now.
this. Yes, thank you. Tom, what's your thoughts on this?
Thank you. So, I mean, to go back to the general question of trends, I think a trend in the UK certainly is increase in rate, and specifically in relation to responsible gambling, trend is the increase of regulation. So just in this year, in relation to responsible gambling, we've had a ban on credit cards being used for gambling, mandatory participation with an industry-wide self-exclusion program, new requirements for VIPs, whereby you're going to have to understand the affordability and various other elements of them. We're going to have further consultations on affordability, which will be for the first time, I think, probably in any UK leisure market where the government will be saying how much a person can spend, which is going to be no more than probably about £100, sorry, no less than probably £100 a month, no more than about 2,000 without doing further checks. And then there are more changes to come. So there's going to be a review of the Gambling Act following this year. Just turning to a couple of the other speakers' points, completely agree with Vasiliki about increasing restrictions on gambling advertising. So relatively recently in the UK, we've had the whistle-to-whistle ban, which is a ban on sports betting advertising during the course of a match. So you can only have it before the match or after the match on the program. There are now some groups pushing to have complete ban on gambling advertising in relation to sport, which would include shirt sponsorship. We'll have to see how that plays out in the next 6 months or so. I also agree with her comments in relation to more restrictions on aggressive marketing. And it's very difficult for operators to have to comply with a variety of different codes. So an industry code, the advertising regulator code, and requirements from the Gambling Commission. And then just turning to a couple of Nadiya's points, again, I agree with her comments. So more restrictions, again, just from a responsible gambling perspective, or that's how they're being pitched, certainly in relation to game design. So we've had a consultation on game design. The positive of that is that the Commission are consulting with the industry. How much notice they take, we'll have to see, but they are consulting. But again, she also noted Nadiya noted there have been some restrictions which have just been introduced without consultation, which is unusual. So those restrictions in relation to coronavirus, which would include banning withdrawals, cancelling withdrawals, or reverse withdrawals. So that's been new as well. So in short, much more regulation. And the effect, obviously, it makes life harder for operators. They're having to spend more on compliance, both to prevent matters and if they're getting fined. And they've got less flexibility with regards to what they can do on marketing and game design.
Thanks, Tom. I was thinking about touching one more issue here at the regulation side of the story.
Miloš, mogu samo dopunu, molim vas?
If I can interject.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Čujemo se. Pa evo, postavio bih I pitanje.
Well, let me ask this question, I'm just thinking aloud, talking about these issues. Where do we start from? Where do these problems come from? The other participants in the EU, do you have access to data as to why this is all being done? To what extent is the population threatened by all of this? What's the percentage of pathological gamblers, of problem gamblers that you have? And what's the percentage of people who can be at risk of this problem or challenge? So what I'd like to say, what I'd like to ask rather, is related to my experience in Serbia. In Serbia, there is no relevant research. There are no findings about the extent to which this problem is widespread. So that's the case in Serbia. I believe it's the case in the EU and elsewhere. Often, whenever the media are in their silly season, when there's not enough on the news, often they will turn an isolated case of, say, somebody who's a child who's gone and spent their lunch money on gambling or on betting. And then they spin that up into a huge story, and they start trotting out these numbers of hundreds of thousands of addicts and this huge growing problem of child addiction to gambling and so on. What I can say responsibly is that these are all completely unfounded allegations. Mr. Puhač, I think, can back me up here. There's no relevant findings about the number of people who face a gaming addiction. We had only one such study in Serbia, and it said that under 1% of the general population can be at risk of this. So Serbia is about 7 million people. So we can do the maths there, 7 million adults. So we're ignoring rather where the problem comes from. We need to identify that problem, and only then can we address it appropriately. Just introducing restrictions for restriction's sake is completely useless. What will we achieve by doing that? Well, many people will spend more money on compliance than on trying to provide a quality service that's useful to everyone. Let me give you another example from Serbia. I'll go back to children who gamble. People who are under 18 in Serbia are not permitted to gamble at all. So this was introduced at the initiative of the Operator Association. So you can't even allow somebody who's under 18 to enter into a betting shop. They can't just walk into a cafe or a restaurant. Obviously, if you walk into a cafe and you're under 18, you can always buy alcohol, or you can be given alcohol. But this is not the case with gambling in Serbia. So I think that implementing laws is key, and oversight of this implementation is key. So somebody who's under 18 can only place a bet only if they're allowed to do so by somebody who's over 18.
Maybe to discuss. I think that we all very much understand what you have said. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Zoran, you were mentioned, so maybe you can give us some introduction to this. Just unmute your microphone, please.
I had some personal researches about this kind of, let's say, dilemma. I mentioned previously about stereotypes, and Borjan is quite right. There is no results of any researches around the world about social cost of gambling industry or industry of games of chance. That's the serious problem. I strongly believe that there is no researches, accepted researches, because of stereotypes. It is really, let's say, dangerous to say that there is so many positive influences on the society according to the gambling industry. you will be, you will be beaten to death if you try to say it in publicity. Because of that, it's a serious problem. For example, Great Britain, as far as I know, Great Britain has their gambling commission, has a really, really good researches. And if I remember, they don't have any rise of pathological gamblers some years ago, continuously. But it is very difficult to say that because of stereotypes in the public. That's the main problem. I mentioned, kind of joking, that this problem is old, thousand and thousand years. We didn't have any regulations before 5 decades through whole history. And there is a strong stereotype about the whole industry. That's the problem. Politicians, they use it. It's very good to rise their popularity using some kind of bad news from the industry. Pathological gamblers, it's an excellent way to rise your popularity, to express your care about society, etc., etc. According to the World Health Organization, I think 1.something% of whole populations has a kind of possibility to become a gambler, pathological gambler. It includes some grandmas in the mountains, and some youngsters, they don't know to read. 1% and comma something. But stereotype is something else, and that's the problem. The way of changing it is the question for communicational managers, public relation managers, let's say even client managers, etc., etc. I said,
Vasiliki, yes, I can see your microphone is on now, so
yes.
Please.
I am dying to comment here, so thank you. I want to add that, yes, I agree that there is not much evidence. Indeed, this is a very few % of the population. To the lack of evidence, I can also add, for example, that there is no research proving that advertising causes problem gambling. There is no research proving that people who stayed at home gambled more. In fact, there are figures from gambling authorities proving the opposite. However, I refer to what Zoran said earlier, the power of public perception. So I don't think that if we want to continue to be an entertainment industry, and if all gambling operators realize the necessity of responsibility, I don't think that we should stick anymore to the lack of evidence. I think that we should stick to the fact that this 1% of population needs to be protected. So instead of focusing our energy on changing regulators' minds or proving that there is no evidence or showing very little figures around problem gambling, we should focus our energy on protecting these people, on being more responsible, on doing more responsible advertising, doing more for detecting and intervening when a problem gambler is being identified. This is my point. I think that the answer to the current challenges and the current problems of the industry is responsibility.
Thank you, Vasiliki. Tom, Nadiya, would you like you to add something?
I just
Zoran, I see your microphone. Yeah, okay.
I just want to say one sentence. I completely agree with Vasiliki. In a first term, I mentioned that pretty often public opinion is more important than the regulations. And dealing with that It's on the footpath of Vasiliki said now. You have to take care about vulnerable groups, etc., etc., etc. Thank you.
So,
Tom, please, yes.
agree with what Zoran,
Sorry, Nadiya.
agree with what Zoran said about the rates not increasing. So in the UK, the rates have broadly stayed between 0.5% to 0.7% over the last 5 years with slight fluctuations. I'd say probably the bigger question is whether the gambling industry just accepts that that is the rate of problem gamblers there will be, and that's what it will always be, and that it should only be worried about an increase in that, or whether it should be endeavoring to reduce that number further, or reduce the number of people who play who are problem gamblers to a lower level.
Nadiya, you wanted something to say, please.
Yeah, I also think that at the moment, especially now during COVID, there is a lot of pressure on politicians to make some kind of decision, especially when it comes to responsible gaming. But the reality, do we really know what are the effective measures here? No, I don't think anybody really know what should be taken. We don't know a lot about what should be taken. We are still running on the same setups like before. We're introducing the fines and everything, but other things are really working, you know, and as Vasiliki mentioned, we would like to protect the players, but the reality, they're just punishing the companies. And for me, like the regulator should come up with the measures rather than introducing the fines and everything. They should be introducing, you know, the solutions, you know, what should be applicable for the players, and not just like, you know, putting everything on the operator's shoulders, because we're in the same, you know, nobody, like, let's be honest, nobody would like to deal with problematic gamblers, not the company, you know, not the operators, not any business, but how to protect them in the way that they would be protected. So this is somewhere where we have to focus on as well.
Thank you, Nadiya. Thank you all for this this excellent discussion. And this is the moment where I mean, we again return to this public opinion, public perception about the industry. And I think that the actions, the marketing actions, everything the company is doing is quite important. So, and I talked to you, Borjan, before this conference call about what Mozzart, for example, is doing in Serbia, what kind of promotion, how does it support the society without promoting anything. But what are here the how would I say, what are the challenges you have on the field? So maybe you can just talk a little about that, so we can also include other international experts also to discuss what's happening abroad.
The mic is off.
Sada?
Now it's fine.
Evo samo da kažem dakle da je mi dolazimo iz
We come from an industry, at least in Serbia, it is very precisely regulated, heavily regulated, and there is some space for improvement, for further improvement, but the gambling industry affects generally on the budget of Serbia with €500 million on an annual level. So that's a huge amount of money. Of course, if such a huge money is being invested into that, we try to be in line with all that. So we pay a lot of attention on CSR and social responsibility in general. Let me tell you that during COVID, the Mozzart company in all the markets where it works, so that's 8, including Serbia. So we have about €1 million for the help of the health system of the country, for the medical staff, doctors, so everyone who needed this help. So from the very beginning, we had the CSR as an integral part of our business strategy of the Mozzart company. So we always try to give back to the society and community in which we work. So I think that we are trying, when we talk about social responsibility, to always push boundaries. We'll give you some examples. In the last 3 or 4 years, we became partners to almost all state institutions. We have cooperation with Belgrade University, with the ministries of defense, health, education. So there is practically no relevant institutions in the society with which we have no cooperation. I think that we have a full right to do so. We are totally regulated industry by law. We are responsible towards the society. I think no one can prevent us from wishing to invest a part of our profit into this community and help those who need this help the most. Maybe let me go back to the first story. That's a change in our marketing strategy. So CSR is now involved. We are involved in the CSR when we talk about marketing. So we are trying to prevent this negative perception that follows our industry from the very beginning. So that's it. But
Challenges do you actually see on the market? I mean, as you said, the market is regulated, something is happening. But for example, what were the challenges you have encountered during organizing such actions, etc.?
Znate, sad ću vam kazati, jeste,
I
da.
will tell you, yes. So far, there was not a single situation. I mean, I'm in this company for 4 years. We did not have any bad situations in the public for any of our CSR activity. I don't see any challenges there. We take care, of course, even if we have an activity organized by a Mozzart company, I'm talking on my behalf, when something is directed to some building that can be used by the minors. We had the reconstruction of basketball courts or something like that. We never invite them to play. We don't advertise our quotas or anything. So it's purely CSR. So maybe some people might find it strange, but I will tell you that a few days ago we have opened a kids' playground at the invitation of a priest. So the priest is next to the kindergarten, and the kindergarten kids did not have any place to play. So the people from the church asked us if we can build that, and we did that. So I think that the perception of the public about this industry is slowly changing. So I conclude this because of our everyday requests for help that we receive. So we get tens and hundreds of requests from different institutions and individuals. People are asking us to help for medical treatment, to improve sports, finance clubs that cannot do that on their own. So basically, this is our path that we have chosen. We want to help as much as possible, and we are trying to change this negative perception about our industry. Let me tell you as well that when we talk about social responsibility, so we are one of the founders of this association of gambling operators. We started this project together with a hospital dealing with addictions, and we call it "It's Possible to Stop." So all the operators that come in touch with our players are trained to observe if there is any beginning of any addiction. So if they see that a player's game is not going in the right direction, when they see that it could become potentially harmful or problematic, they know how to approach this person, where to direct this person. So every one of our operators have gone through this training. So we are trying to be partners to the state when we talk about prevention. So we have personally initiated many projects that could contribute to that. So we are very active in this field.
I have a question for the audience. So I will just spell it out for you. I will just read it for you. It's a question for you. If you serve alcohol in your gambling facilities.
Na našim uplatnim mjestima. Da.
Yes. And if you do you think that is socially responsible, and do you think that by serving alcohol, you're influencing the decisions of the gamblers? Although there are no official data about it and researches, what do you think about it?
Ne mogu da dovedem te dve stvari u vezu nikako.
I cannot connect these two things. In our facilities, in our venues, only persons who are not minors, so they are over 18 years of age, so we don't sell spirits. So if we talk about alcohol, I think it's only beer that we are serving to those who are older than 18, of course. They are allowed to come inside, so I cannot connect these two facts.
Vasiliki, Tom, Nadiya, Zoran, do you have something to add? Borjan presented, they're very actively involved in Serbia. Most of these actions are very positive. But for example, what are the cases in European Union, in other countries? Zoran mentioned the example about the playground. It's Mozzart financed. Is it the problem to have a Mozzart brand on the playground which is renovated? To be very, very simple in asking that. Anyone?
If I can shortly comment. I'm not here to be the judge of what's good and what's not. I can only mention that in the I want to mention self-regulation as a tool to show responsibility and to prevent even further restrictions. In the EGBA Code of Conduct for Responsible Gambling Advertising that was published in April this year, we have a dedicated chapter on how to protect minors, from seeing or being targeted by advertising. And there was a lot of discussion about ad banners on the streets, how there are some member states that prohibit putting banners of gambling advertising next to schools. So it's a part. If you want to show your brand close to a school or close to a playground, can be judged by this perspective, I would say.
Anyone else would like to comment on this? Tom, yes. Mm-hmm.
So maybe sort of a couple of comments more widely in relation to CSR and then specifically on the younger person's advertising. So more widely on the CSR, say that in the UK, it's important that, or at least from a public perception, there is a genuine partnership between the gambling operator and whichever activity they're supporting. But then not quite CSR, but how gambling is contributing back to communities. For example, shirt football sponsorship is very important to a lot of football clubs in the UK, the sponsorship by the gambling companies. And the football companies have been one of the few dissenting voices against banning gambling sponsorship. So other people have noted it's very easy political capital to argue that there should be more restrictions on gambling advertising or a ban on gambling advertising. And then specifically on the points about under sort of advertising which might appeal to persons who are younger, in the UK, there are very strict laws on that. So you wouldn't be able to use a person, for example, who is under 25 or appears to be under 25 in a gambling advert, or have gambling adverts which are particularly likely to appeal to children. So, for example, using cartoon characters.
Zoran, I saw your microphone on for a moment to be on. So yes, please.
Yeah, I want to comment just a little bit. Our regulations about marketing activities in Serbia, they are in the same way as Vasiliki mentioned. It is forbidden to advertise nearby schools, etc., kindergarten, etc., etc. And but Borjan told about different things, not about advertising, but about dealing with some facilities, helping for, let's say, healthy life or whole population. It's one thing. The second is about self-regulation. It's the real trend in the Europe and even around the world. We had in Serbia, we had good examples. Even 10 years ago, Borjan mentioned that we influenced regulators to forbid minors to be allowed to for minors to visit bed shops. Previously, 10 years ago, it was allowed for minors to go to bed shops, but it is not allowed to gamble. It was a serious problem, you know. And after our action of our association, regulators adopted our suggestion, and 10 years ago they forbid. It was forbidden for minors to go in bed shops, etc., etc. The second one, very important thing about self-regulations practice in Serbia is the actual regulations, Article 6, social responsibility. It is called, but it is about let's say responsible gaming, because there is an obligation. Our association insisted on it and go to the practice before it became part of the law. For all staff dealing with players, they should be educated to recognize first potential signs of pathological activities in gambling, of course. And nowadays it is regulated in the law, and it's obligation for all organizers. It's a kind of self-regulated matters which became regulated obligation. I think it's a good example.
Zoran, so if I can be very simple, so you all agree that if Mozzart built a playground for the children, it's okay for the Mozzart brand to stand on that playground. Is that correct, or I'm just not that much in that issue, so I can understand it easily?
It is completely correct according to the law. If it is not nearby schools. I'm talking about advertising, not about helping.
Okay.
It's social responsibility is kind of different thing. It deals partly with marketing, but it's kind of different thing. The law or regulations are very precisely defined. They said no adverts nearby schools.
Okay. Thank you, Zoran.
And if you don't have any advert, and Borjan said they don't have any advert, it is okay.
Yeah. Considering that we have 2 minutes. Yes,
Can I just add something?
Try to be short. Yes, yes, sir.
Vrlo kratko.
Yes.
Mislim, zašto u startu polazimo...
Why do we start from the fact that consuming the gambling is bad?
I believe this is a very big issue, and I'm just concerned that we just this is a wholly new subject for possibly a new panel. But considering that we have only 1 minute left.
Pazite, izvinjam se, zakonski je strogo regulisano. Maloletnici ne mogu...
The minors cannot go into our facilities. They cannot play the games. They cannot. It's very clear.
Thank you,
Borjan.
Thank you all for a great panel. I will just use this last opportunity to call all participants to join us on the WM Equity Partners 15 minutes live stream. Right after this panel, where my colleagues will present some of the services WM Equity Partners is providing. So have a great day. Thank you very much for a very constructive discussion, and most importantly, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.